So let's talk about exit signals. So if you've gone through the getting started videos, you've reached the point where you've created entry signals in BloodHound saying, when my rules are met, give me a signal. And then inside BlackBird, we've loaded up the BloodHound file. So up here under signal, and actually we can start fresh just for the example. We go signal, BloodHound signal. We're going to load up that file. So we load up the BloodHound file and we told it inside that file, we've created some logic. We haven't renamed it yet. We're going to. We're saying that's our signal rules that we want to use to enter trades automatically, either live or for backtesting, right? But we haven't yet talked about exit signals. But to do exit signals, we need to create a whole other set of logic to say, when this other thing happens on my chart, when my indicators or price are behaving a certain way, send a signal to flatten the trade, whatever trade I'm in. So let's go modify our BloodHound logic in order to do that. So since we have BloodHound loaded up inside of BlackBird, BloodHound shows up here. It's a teal color to tell us, hey, this is the BloodHound that BlackBird added to our chart. These are our signals that BlackBird, the trade manager, has added to our chart. So let's go up here. These are our entry signals. So to keep ourselves organized and clear, let's rename our logic template. So this is the tab that indicates this logic template. Let's rename that to entry signals because we're about to create a new logic whose entire job will be to flatten our trades. So exit signals. So whatever we put in here, and once we load that up into BlackBird, we're telling it when we get a signal, get out of whatever trade we're in. I've created a logic that's similar to one I've seen many people do, where they say, you know what, let's exit our trades on the final bar of the day. This uses SharkIndicators time block indicator. So it's under the tools time block. And what this does is saying, hey, during this period of time, I'm mountain time, so it's offset by a couple hours. Look at the checkbox disappeared. Let's go, is the end bar. We're basically saying, is it the final bar of the day, which I have the time block on here so I can see during that same time period. I can see it's highlighted on my chart. So we're saying on the final bar of my day, of the day I've chosen to do, give me a signal. And by default, it's a long signal. Give me a signal on that final bar. And since this is going to be our exit signals, actually, let's close this and refresh the chart so we can see the name show up here. So now we have entry signals. There's our entry signals. And here's our new exit signals. We're saying when this signal appears on the final bar of the day, get out of my trade. So let's go into BlackBird and tell it that that's our plan. So we'll go back into our signal rules. And now the entry signal template now sees that it is the entry signals that we've created in there. And the exit, if we check that, we can choose the exit signal logic template. That's why we named it that, so it's really clear where we're at. So now, when we're ready to auto trade on a live market, when it gets an entry signal, for example, this short entry signal, let's take this as an example. We enter short here, and assuming we're still in the trade at the time when an exit signal appears, it will get out of that trade. This long exit signal will flatten any short trade. Now that's a key detail because the direction of the exit signal matters. If we go back here, let me go show our entry signals again. Let's go back here. Here's an example of a long entry. If we were to enter a long trade here, but we get a long exit signal here, it'll actually be ignored. Interesting, right? You might think, well, I want to get out no matter what. On the last bar, I don't care if it's a long trade or a short trade, I just want to get out. We can do that, but it's important to recognize that the direction of your exit signal matters. Because we had to do it that way because there are some traders that want to control that. They say, in scenario A, I only want to get out of long trades. And in scenario B, I only want to get out of short trades. And so we give you that control to say, I have different rules depending on the direction of the trade. I only want to get out based on the trade that I'm in. So you have that power. But let's imagine that you do want to get out of whatever trade you're in. Long, short, I don't care if I'm in a trade. On the final bar of the day, let's just flatten the trade and get the heck out of there. So we can go modify our exit signal rule and say, you know what? I need to produce both long and short on the same bar at the same time. So that way it doesn't care the direction, it's just going to get out. So to do that, universally, we can add a long short modifier. And we got to set the mode to difference. Now, we're not going to talk about why that works. There are other videos that talk about that. But just trust me that whatever logic that you run through the long short modifier with difference as the mode, if I go here, watch this. It's going to turn from green to an ugly brown color. Let's plug that in. There's the ugly brown. And that's because it's a mix of both long and short on the same bar at the same time, saying that since this is an exit signal, I don't care if we're currently in a long trade or a short trade, flatten the trade. Send either a buy or a sell signal in order to flatten us out of that trade. Okay, so now we've created a more universal exit signal that works regardless of the trade that we're in. So let's take a look and see. Yeah, so I don't have a profit or stop loss set up. So right now, the way we have this set up is we have a single order set, market entry, with no way to get out of the trade, at least on a back test, except for exit signals. So this is a perfect test. Let's go and enable backtest mode so we can see this in action. So we'll go back to our strategy rules, and I'm going to enable backtest mode on this strategy. So we got to disable it first. So enabled, let's uncheck that, hit apply, so that we can go turn on backtest mode. Remember, this is the BlackBird strategy settings. So turn on backtest mode, re-enable it, and hit OK. And by doing that, every time we refresh the chart, we're running a fresh back test on this chart. So we can see, actually, our entry trade occurred way back here, and we'll talk about why. So we enter long. There's no reason to get out because there's no stop loss or profit target. So as price goes up and down, it doesn't care. BloodHound, BlackBird, they don't care. We haven't told it to get out unless there's an exit signal or a reverse entry. We'll talk about that in a second. But we get in long. We're still long here, and so we ignore this entry signal. We're still looking at the entry signals. So we're going to ignore that entry, continue through. The official day starts, right? So we're going to go there. Long entry, we're still long, so we're ignoring those. And there's our close. Now, as you're messing around with this, you might have a tendency to glance at the chart and be like, why is it closing my trade? It's important to remember that it's because you have exit signals, most likely. So we were in long, we got a short exit signal because this produced a short signal in addition to long. And so we exited the trade. And there we go. Let's go find another example. Here's an example that was actually outside of this example. So we were in a short trade and it actually exited on the session close. That's a setting in the strategy settings. This is just a universal strategy setting down here, exit on session close. You can turn that off if you don't want it to, but that's default behavior for strategies. So we can ignore that for now. But here's one where we entered short, stayed short, and then we exited down here. Okay. The only other way that we would be exiting trades in a system like this where there's when there's no profit or stop loss is if we get a reversal signal. So let's go find an example of that. The session close. Here we go. Okay. So again, we're looking at our entry signals. We enter a short trade here. Still short, and then we see an entry signal that's the reverse. We get a long signal. By default, BlackBird will close our short position and buy a market entry long trade. So we're closing short and reversing, entering a long trade, and then eventually we come and hit our exit signal, which we can preview by switching this. Okay, so that's the only other way out of a system like this, is it's not really getting out, it's just reversing the trade. Now that setting, by the way, can be modified here. So opposite signals force reversal trade. If you uncheck that, then it will just ignore any signals except, in this case, an exit signal. So you get to decide. Now, speaking of little details like that, one thing that's worth knowing is what happens if we get an entry signal on the same bar that we get an exit signal that would normally exit. So for example, if we get a long entry on the same bar as a short exit, remember, short exit flattens long entries, long trades. If we're in that scenario where they happen at the same time, then it's just ignored. We stay flat. Exit always overrides entry. Now, another little tidbit here, you'll notice that I've been switching back and forth. Entry signals, exit signals. What if I was doing this on a live market? Let's say auto trading was turned on, so we're sort of hot now, and listening for entry signals. So if an entry signal were to appear now, what happens if I switch this to exit, right? Well, all this is doing up here is changing what is showing on the chart. We're just saying, hey, I want to preview this logic template that I called entry signals. And now I want to preview my exit signals. But BlackBird will completely ignore what you're doing up here because we've already pre-planned how it should behave. We've already told BlackBird, hey, entry signals should come from this set of rules and exit signals should come from this set of rules. The only exception to that is if you set this for the entry signals only, if you set it to use chart pull down. That does exactly what it says. It's saying that on a live market, I've got auto trading on, signals are coming in live, or the price is changing live. Whatever I have this set to will act as my entry signals. Now, you can imagine you want to be much more careful going back and forth like this because on a live market, whatever you're currently looking at up here will become your entry signals. Now, most people don't need to do that. Most people are better suited having a setup like this where they're just previewing what they set up, but they've pre-planned how it should behave up here by choosing that. But you can imagine some scenarios where you say, you know what, I've got two sets of entry signals and I want to manually switch between them depending on market conditions. I knew one guy that had a separate set of signals that were only long signals and a whole other separate logic template whose job was to enter short trades. And throughout the day, he was switching back and forth between them, not the entry and exit, but entry and entry. Entry long, entry short, for example. He was switching between them based on his own sentiment. He's the master of his trade system, and so he was deciding at a moment's notice which direction he wanted to trade. And so you could imagine that could be a useful use for setting this to use chart pull down. Now that has nothing to do with exit signals. You can't do that for exits. It's only entries. And most people are better suited setting it to a specific entry signal logic template and sort of let it run to whatever degree of automation you're comfortable. Now, one thing that you should at least consider for your own trading scenario is what many traders would consider very dangerous about what we're looking at right here. Now you might be wondering, what is so dangerous about this? I've got an order set, it's just a market entry, and then I'm going to use my exit signals to get out of my trades. No problem. At the end of the day, I'm always going to be out of the trade. No harm done. Well, what happens if you're just relying on exit signals to get out of the trade and there's no stop loss involved anywhere? What happens if your computer crashes or you lose power or you lose internet connection? Your BloodHound signals and BlackBird itself and NinjaTrader are all running locally on your computer. Now that's fine under most circumstances. If you've got reliable power, a good computer, good internet, all that stuff, probably not going to be a problem. And so these exit signals and various different rules that you have built into BlackBird are really nice additional safeguards and minute control over how your trade will play out. But if there is a scenario where you lose control over your trades because of, power goes out, internet goes out, whatever, you are no longer in control of that trade, and there's no risk mitigation of any kind anymore. And so that's why, again, we are not trade coaches. We are not here to tell you how you should trade or that you should use a stop loss or whatever. But I'll just put it like this. I don't think I've ever met an experienced trader who would consider it a good idea to have a trade without at least some kind of stop loss, some order which is sitting on the broker side. When you submit this order set, this entry, it's submitting an associated stop loss order, an order whose job is to flatten that order set or flatten the trade when price reaches that level. It is now the broker's responsibility saying, hey, when we hit that stop loss, broker, you get out of the trade. You exit that. That's your responsibility. That's a very powerful safeguard because if you lose power to your computer, your broker is still responsible for at least that ultimate level. Now, you may not be comfortable with price coming down that far, and so you might have other rules that limit your likely losses, either using exit signals, money management rules, risk management rules, scheduler in BlackBird, things like that help you have more control. But your stop loss is widely considered your ultimate safeguard in case something goes wrong with your computer. So I hope that makes sense. Again, we're not here to tell you that you should use a stop loss, but seriously consider what I've told you and look into it deeper on your own to really learn. If you didn't know that already, really look into this to understand the mechanics of how stop loss orders work, and why it can be valuable to have your broker responsible for that, at least that level of safeguard. All right. So like I said, this video was not a full rundown of signals, entry or exit signals, just to give you a taste for how exit signals work in BlackBird and to kind of get you started with that idea. So to learn more, you can go to our website, go to support documentation, and then under BlackBird on the left, you can go to trade signals. Now, if you are seriously planning to use signals, entry, and especially exit, you're going to want to read through this page in detail so that you can have a clearer idea of, for example, how exit signals work and really dig it into your brain that short exit will exit long signals or long trades and vice versa. It's not intuitive at first, but there are reasons why we did it that way. So read through this page, and then at the bottom of this page, there is a video that is pretty old, to be honest, but it's still very relevant. It just uses the old interface of BloodHound, but it's all about signals, specifically BloodHound signals in BlackBird, how the exit works. And Zach, it's an hour long. Zach goes into much deeper details on some of these concepts. So if you're really serious about doing this, that's a good video to watch. So hope that helps. Have a great day.